So let's talk about the presidents that you've served. The list includes Nixon,
Bush,
Ford,
and Clinton.
Reagan.
Now, the latter three were part-time.
You know,
They were all committed people. They're all relatively good presidents. Not a one of them had the strength of character of Gerald Ford. The notion that this man, who was appointed president, had to run for election in less than 2 years, took on an issue like energy, personally drove it, knowing that it was going to upset people, voters, but knowing it was in the best interest of the country, and he was going to do it anyway. It gave his staff a kind of an inspiration that you can't duplicate. And if you ask Alan Greenspan today, he would tell you that of all the governments he's worked with, all the years he was in D.C., the best by far and the one with most character was the Ford government.
in terms of energy policy, how would you compare the 5 presidents that you've worked for and known?
Since Ford, not one president has taken it on, which is criminal. They paid lip service to it and did some of the easy stuff. I mean, Jimmy Carter formed the Department of Energy. The organization was never part of our issue. We were doing just fine organizationally, but we needed a substantive legislation. So he did zero in that area. Reagan dismantled what Carter did, but he did zero, as did both Bushes, zero. And I finally, after all these years, became convinced that our democracy, the way it's now practiced, is not able to come to grips with these very complicated, controversial measures. It's like our debt issue today, skyrocketing debt. The only way to reduce debt is to raise taxes and to cut entitlements, both political dynamite.
Looking back now, 35 years later, what are the 2 or 3 most important lessons that you learned in the 70s that you would apply to today?
Well, the most important lesson by far is the one I touched on earlier, and that is there are some parts of our public policy that need to be exempt from the democratic political process. We will never solve our energy problems or our debt problems or the next big problem to come along if it stays in the political world, because what struck me is how I believed that what we were presenting was the right thing for this country and everybody in it. And I'd have a serious Republican senator tell me, I agree with you, but I can't vote for it because I'm up for re-election and my opponent will use it against me, which was lightning striking me, saying this democracy has some shortcomings, the way we practice it. Now, I think had Ford been elected, his relationships with the senior members of Congress were so good that we had a chance to pull off carving energy away from the everyday political debate. I can't say that for sure, but it taught me that we should be finding a way to do it. And when I talk this way, people's eyes roll, and they're saying, if they're very polite, not out loud, this guy comes from Mars, it's impossible. We can't think that it's impossible. Well, we'll never get some of this stuff fixed. We just can't. We can't give up on it. So that lesson has stuck with me time and time again.
And you said that lesson can be solved with leadership. Is that enough?
Sure. I think if a guy like Ford was in the White House and willing to risk his election by saying to the leadership on the other side, we have to agree to take this out of the political ambit, and I'm going to tell my party that in the election process they're not to use this issue, and you're going to do the same with your party, and I'm going to say this publicly, this offer publicly, and you get up and tell people you don't want to do that. I think people like Ford and Mansfield and Albert, yeah, I mean, we had giants in the Congress. Hubert Humphrey was a close friend of mine, a very big Democrat, but when it came down to the nitty-gritty, he was there. Ted Kennedy, and I made a deal with Ted Kennedy. It was very painful for him to do his side because it meant raising fuel oil prices in New England. But I did what he wanted, and He rose to the occasion and did what I asked him to do, which is lesson number two. Lesson number two is, in Washington, you have, by and large, human beings. And Ted Kennedy and I had a relationship, and we had a trust. He was dead set against most of what I was trying to get done. But we were able to work together in that context. By and large, you can develop human contact with the other side if you're of such a mind. So that was lesson number two.